Alrighty, what's going on, Macro Perspective peeps? Man, I am super stoked. Today we have an amazing guest. I've been waiting to get this person on. The fact that we got this person on today is kind of insane. Today our guest is Alex Viada, who basically, whoever you follow nowadays that's, good looking, has a good physique, and does a bunch of different sports, is the man that created the term hybrid athlete. With that being said, he's kind of the godfather of this term and really got it going. But a lot of other people popularized it back in 2018 to 2019. You got like the Nick Bears of the world, the people running marathons but are jacked, or the people doing some crazy stuff. But I don't think people understand hybrid athletics truly. And I think Alex, came out with 2 books now, The Hybrid Athlete and The Ultimate Hybrid Athlete. That's primarily what I want to talk about today with Alex. But Alex, real quick, thank you for being on the show. What have you been up to? What's gotten you excited lately? And, how's life nowadays?
Man, life is good. Life is good. It's funny you asked that too, because honestly, the last year and a half has been so consumed with, I think, the book. It's funny. I've been in this field so long. I've been one-on-one coaching, teaching classes, everything else. It's funny. You kind of get into this groove. You get into this mindset. You keep learning and everything else, but I think about a year and a half ago when I talked to the publisher about writing this book, it was such a mental shift for me to get purely into let me summarize everything I've done in my entire career up to this point kind of move. Yeah. And it really, it was exciting, it was fun, and it was exhausting. So I think right now I'm just kind of still coming down from that, still coming down from this massive, endless weekends and evenings of writing and spending hours writing a dozen pages and then throwing them all out and just feeling okay, now I can actually relax my brain a little bit and just do some fun things. I'm training for some silly events, nothing too big or exciting, but it's just nice. It's nice being able to say, okay, I think for a while I've said what I wanted to say, so I can just turn it down just a little bit.
No, that makes a lot of sense. You put a lot of great work in. I've talked with other authors and other people that have done books, and they're like, yeah, I don't want to do anything for a little bit.
Yeah. Well, it's tough, man. I mean, I was so excited to write the book. I was like, okay, awesome. When I wrote the first book, it was a collection of old articles, basically, that I put together. And it was a new idea. I was like, okay, this is cool. And now this time, the publisher was like, you can say anything you want to say. I was like, okay, cool, awesome. And so I sat down. I got the little advance to get started. I opened up a Word document. I sat there in front of my computer and had about a 45-minute long panic attack because I had no idea where to start. So, yeah.
I'm reading the book right now. I'm not fully through. Usually, I like to say I'm prepped. I've done my homework before I do a podcast guest. I got the book, and then other things came up. And I couldn't get through. I'm halfway through. But I'm learning a lot. I love a lot of the concepts that you're bringing up. With certain exercise science and exercise physics terms, you kind of put different terms to it. So I like a lot of that. You get really pedantic about terms, and you're like, I really want to scrape from the top, just things that are just arbitrary. You really would want to get to the things of that. I do want to ask you, over the 10 years of articles of the hybrid athlete to the ultimate hybrid athlete, what have you found to be the top things? And we can kind of go down this discussion, but what are the things that you've changed your mind about, or gotten a little bit deeper into what a hybrid athlete is?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question, because when I first thought of the idea, or when I first thought of the methodology, a large part of it was just saying, can you put things together? And there was a lot of trimming the fat, I think, was sort of that was the real focus of the original hybrid athlete ideas. If you want to do 2 or more sports, you got to trim the fat, you got to focus on what's effective. And, those are the pieces that you put together, and you got to put them together intelligently. I think one of the things is the last 10 years, I guess, has really been a lot of refining of what is the quality work that's left over, and refining that, and not just trimming the fat, but also improving the quality of what you do. Reading a lot more, learning a lot more about, different intensity management in endurance sports, and looking at a lot more things, a lot more in depth on, sports science and strength training, and the value of form work and dynamic effort work and speed, and how you differentiate rate of force production from maximum effort lifting. And, so it's been a lot of that, not a huge change on the surface, but a lot more looking at the work you do and saying, okay, what are the real critical pieces of this session? Yeah. Not just, okay, I'm not doing wasteful accessory work. I'm doing just these exercises. How am I doing these exercises? What do I want to get out of them? And I think really a big part of my career, even as a coach, is just making sure I know what the intent is of everything you do. Every set, every rep, every time you go out there, there's intent to it. And that's really been my biggest focus.
Yeah, I like a lot of that, being able to really understand what the intent, what the focus is, because you can kind of get a little bit overcrowded by some of the noise, especially on like social media nowadays, right? Like this person's training for that, you get inspired, you want to do some of this, but you're also training for this thing, so you get inspired to do that. But then it's like you're trying to put the best of two different programs into the same thing without actually looking at what you specifically need. So you're trying to put yourself in a box. I mean, that brings up memories for me. So I grew up as a wrestler growing up, right?
Mhm.
And back in the day, the whole thing was they literally just said, go run and lift. But
Yeah.
what does that even mean? And I don't really, I didn't really understand it until I got a strength coach in later years of they're like, well, it's not just run and lift. We've got to train your systems for the sport. You have to
Mhm.
understand your strength and your thing. So did you do any testing for that? And then also at the same time, did you like working on your weaknesses, or are you just running and lifting because like you go run 8, 10 plus miles because that's what the different wrestlers have done before and they've been successful? But that doesn't necessarily mean your aerobic capacity has gotten better. You probably just now fatigued yourself. And then that was my problem. I was probably, I don't know if there's always a thing of like overtraining, but maybe like this under recovering in my system. You know
Mhm.
what I'm saying? So like,
Yeah.
I feel like, yeah, talking to that concept of the person that can get so many different inputs, right? They don't know where to start. And that makes me want to ask a question of like in the book, you talk about kind of knowing the person. What are some really like valuable assessments to get for somebody if they're trying to be a hybrid athlete? Now, the term hybrid athlete doesn't mean anything if we don't know what their sport is, right? So I guess
Right.
it's probably
Yeah.
understanding the mechanisms of that sport or whatever. So
Yeah, I think that's probably just as an aside to the question. I think also one of the most important things is like a hybrid athlete, it can be anything, because I always said that hybrid is a methodology. It's a way of approaching programming. It's not doing more than one sport. Hybrid is this whole method of trimming the fat, focusing on intent, focusing on the important components, and putting everything together in a way that allows the athlete to achieve the target intent of each session with minimal disruption. Like that's it. So yeah, again, like hybrid athlete can be anything, but the important assessments, well, that's why so much of what I focus on, especially in the book, is just I love a good, RPE based session and everything else, but I really think it's valuable to get granular on what athletes can actually do. Like, what is your true, like, one repetition max? Because we base percentages off of that. What is your running threshold? That second ventilatory threshold. We got a lot of inspiration actually, even from just the sort of the renaissance with the Norwegian methods of training and how carefully they look at different levels of stress and how they understand that minor differences in intensity, just keeping things just a little bit below intensity, can let you do so much more quality work. So a lot of the biggest assessments are really knowing where those inflection points are for you. Where, what is your VVO2 max? Is it necessary for everybody? No. But if you're trying to do that work, so it's basically saying when you look at your performance, when you look at what you're trying to do, you really need to know your various thresholds. You need to know what is the heaviest weight you're comfortable lifting. What is the weight at which form starts to break down? What is the weight you feel that you can move most efficiently? Because a lot of this stuff dictates what your target intensity is for each session and lets you keep the intent. Somebody says, okay, we're going to be lifting and you're going to be doing speed work. You go, well, what does that mean? Does that mean, what does that mean? How fast do you need to lift the bar? Like there's a lot to it. So it's understanding, okay, if I say we're going to work on technique this week in this movement, I'm saying we're going to work on technique because we don't want you over stressing other
yeah.
systems. So how do we understand what that intensity means? And be very clear. Like you said, there's a lot of me being a little bit pedantic, I think, with some definitions and ideas, because that's what's so important is unless you know exactly what your thresholds are, you cannot possibly create an intelligent program around them when you're
Yeah.
trying to do so many things.
No, I love it. I love it. It makes so much sense. I mean, for me, I love the terms. I love like nerding out and reading every little thing and be like, all right, I gotta know that. And I'm that guy that like, I've worked in the strength and conditioning rooms. Both me and Marcos, we're in the clinical world. I work in longevity. He works on longevity. So we look at biomarkers like crazy, right? But it's this thing where it's like, okay, now I'm playing devil's advocate. It's like, all right, Alex, you keep talking, but what if I just want to look good and I want to just be strong and I want to like do those things? Well, obviously anyone can kind of do that, and you're kind of seeing that new, and I hate to use this term, but like bastardized form of like what a hybrid athlete is, because it's like this new, I guess this new surrogate or this new persona. It's like, I'm a hybrid athlete. Well, why? Well, it's because I compete in hyrox, for example, or I do like Deca or Spartan, and it's like, yeah, I run and I lift. That's a training modality. That doesn't mean you're a hybrid athlete, right?
That was always my joke. I used to say that's called exercise. And there's nothing wrong with that. But lifting and running or lifting and doing some sort of cardio is what everyone should do. And I wholeheartedly think it's fantastic that everyone's doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't need to do those things to be hybrid. And you don't need to be hybrid to do those. That's just training. So I think the reason when it gets important is the reason you dig into hybrid methodologies. You say, well, okay, yeah, if I just want to lift weights and go for a run and look pretty good, you can get away with a lot. You can get away with a lot of mistakes. You're not optimizing anything. You're like, all right, I'm going to lift and it feels good. If I feel like I'm lifting too hard and I can't run, all right, maybe I'll take it easier on the lifting, or maybe I'll run on a different day or something. It's pretty simple.
Yeah.
A lot of the hybrid stuff is saying, hey, we want a little bit more performance out of this. Or, alternatively, you're thinking, hey, you know what? I really want to stay serious about this. I'm getting older. I got a tight schedule. I still want to lift heavy and run and look good and all that. But man, I can't afford to do an hour and a half every day, 2 hours every day and feel beat up at the end of the week. How do I do this smarter? That's when you start saying, okay, even though I'm casual, I'm going to use some of these hybrid ideas to maybe make it an hour a day, 5 days a week, do what's important and feel good. That's when I think hybrid plays into this stuff.
Yeah, that really comes into a big component, because I think people forget with athletics, even if you're just a casual person, the overall stress management, right? Stress recovery, like being a parent, for example, being a professional. Like if you're trying to do, for example, for me, I like to do hyrox. My wife likes to do marathons, and she might jump into a hyrox or something like that. I'm living my glory days through hyrox competition, which I know you've said isn't necessarily a hybrid athletics, because there's one point at the end or one time at the end. It's not things that are like two different sports at once, which I agree, it's a one event kind of thing, but you utilize hybrid athletics or hybrid training to get into it. One thing though, I think that people need to hear about, and I think you're probably the best to talk about this because you work with so many clients, is stress adaptation and recovery. I think this is the hard part for a lot of people. So let's say, let's use an aggressive avatar, someone that's doing two completely different sports that are like not going to be helpful for each other. Maybe like, for example, I don't know, something with a weight class, for example, but then you're trying to get really big and strong. Like, for example, like a power lifter, and then like a weight class, maybe like, and then this is like crazy, but like wingsuit, or like a cyclist, because you have to fit into like a tight thing. So like, but you want to be competitive in both. And it's like, and we know that you could, but it just means that stress recovery training cycles have to be, how would you go about that? I know you've probably had something in that persona before.
Yeah, I've had I've had high level cyclists and triathletes who want to do like powerlifting meets and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
I've had a guy from a strongman background who wanted to actually be more competitive in cycling. And cycling is always a great one for that, like you said, because it is one of those sports where everything, especially on like road courses and climbs, it's like people will pay through the nose to get a little bit more aerodynamics and to like lose 2 ounces off their total weight. And yeah, that's where a lot of this really does come in, is that you have to then look and say, okay, well, do you just want to get big and strong, or do you want to just get strong? If we're just looking at strength, we have to understand what strength means. We have to understand the specificity of strength. We have to look at how strength applies to you as an athlete. What are the movements you want to get stronger in? What is your technical proficiency in this? How do we improve all the components of strength? And also realize that we can improve a lot of these without beating you up all the time.
Yeah.
We can have you go in for a squat session that is based purely on rate of force development and skill work. And, ideally, if you do that session, you should be able to come out of that and jump right on the bike and do some intervals, because you're not beating yourself up. But that means understanding that strength is not just lifting heavy all the time. It means strength means something to you. Strength is a skill. It's your ability to, move an object, move a heavy object at a given velocity, given form and everything else. In a lot of ways, it sort of bursts a lot of, I would say, conventional wisdom in some ways, because you're no longer just doing a strength workout. You may have people that are sitting there okay, I'm doing skill work. I'm doing 75% for sets of 4. What is this? I've never lifted like this before. There's a purpose to it. You're practicing this movement. You're improving your sport skill. Same thing with like cycling or running or anything else. Spend a lot of time doing things like cycling form drills and like practicing all around pedaling, practicing position and stability in your pelvis during climbs and during sprints and things like that. So we spend a lot of time breaking these things down and saying, okay, a lot of times when you do single sport training, you can get away without breaking things down because you're throwing the kitchen sink at people.
Yeah.
You're going, yeah, we do some heavy work and then you do some drop downs, and you're probably getting the benefit of all these things in one session because you can recover from them. But what I'm saying is we can't do that. We've got to tease these pieces apart and almost like build your sport proficiency piece by piece and put these pieces where they make the most sense.
That makes a lot of sense because you can't have that risk, right? Especially if they're trying to be competitive in both, let's just say, right?
Yeah.
You have to be very precise. You have to be very on point. And it's interesting you say this because, like, for example, I would say one hybrid athlete that's really interesting is like mixed martial artists, because I've worked with them so much. I can talk about this intimately. Is, when you look at mixed martial artists, a lot of the training, I've been very keen on a lot of this training just myself, but like, for example, Muay Thai guys, they have a lot of longevity in their sport because most of the time they're just in play. They're not trying to kill each other. There's not this. And then you'll have, and then they could do sessions, and if they could try like another sport like jiu-jitsu, like a grappling sport or something like that, and if they're just rolling, they're rolling, it's nothing crazy, and they have longevity because, yes, they're spending a lot of time doing the thing, but they can be recovered because they're not hitting hard rates. They're working on their skill maximization, which in some weird way really helps with conditioning too.
Well, because there's a lot of things. There's like, conditioning, form under stress is always going to fall to the worst training session you've ever had. It's like when you're under stress, your body falls to the highest level of incompetence. Like that's kind of what happens. It's everything with conditioning to like reaction speed and how you act. Because how you act under pressure,
Yeah.
They would say that reaction time isn't really about how fast your brain works. It's about how fast you mimic a movement that you're used to mimicking. Like, reaction time is taught. It's how quickly your brain says, okay, with this stimulus, I need to do this action. And it's repetition that breeds that. Same thing with conditioning and everything else. For a lot of these athletes, like you said, there is a lot of play involved. There is a lot of like, you can repeat something. You can do a lot of sport practice. Like I said, that's one of the reasons, honestly, why I'm such a stickler for like, hey, pay attention to your warm-up sets. I hate it when I see people who just like sloppily throw their way through their warm-up sets and everything else and go, okay. And they don't buckle down until they get to the work sets. And I'm going, hey, you just practiced that movement 30 times the wrong way before you finally start doing it the right way. Like, stop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. I think I'm going right into a great thing. This is so serendipitous, but it's like the mindset, I feel like the mindset is you can't, if you're going to be practicing something that compounds, right? If you're always lollygagging your warm up, it's going to show, right?
Yeah.
If you're lollygagging the cool down because you think, oh, these working things aren't it's 85% of the workout. That's the working part that I'm really caring about. It's like, whoa, hold on. If you've only got an hour per week and you go in there with a mindset of like, and you're trying to be this hybrid athlete of two compounding sports that are like, competitive with each other, you can't waste that hour. If you're a parent and you're busy, like you have to do the warm up with intent. You have to do that training with intent. You do have to do the cool down with intent. And don't try to walk these things through, especially as you age. Like I'm 31 now. I will say, I think my 31-year-old self is in a better position than my 21-year-old self. I'll tell you this. I think that kid wrestling at nationals was just on pure testosterone, cutting weight, wanting to rip people's faces off. Now I'm like, wait, longevity. Make sure I do my form correctly. I warm up appropriately. I make sure, because now I feel better now. And I'm like, I don't want this taken away from me. I want to keep going well into my 40s.
Yeah, it's also funny too because how many of us too, like busy people doing a lot of things, you go into the gym, you go or whatever else, and you go out and you don't have the workout you wanted because the work parts didn't go as well as you'd expected. A lot of us had that. Like we're tired, we're fatigued, we didn't sleep well, whatever else. We go into the gym and our top set or whatever feels heavy, and we go, oh, what a terrible workout. That doesn't have to be a waste. Like if every bit you did, if all the mobility work you did during your warm-ups and all your warm-up sets and all that was high quality, then so what if 4 minutes out of the 60 minutes you spent in there, you didn't hit the objectives? You did so much other good work. And I think, like, kind of like you're saying, when you think about longevity and quality warm-up, you're doing so much good for yourself in the session the whole time. You're taking yourself seriously the whole time. And what a difference that makes, because now you've done 60 minutes of good work rather than just, when you're young, you do 10 to 15 minutes in the middle of balls to the wall and you can get away with it. Yeah. That's about it.
Well, it's funny you say that because yesterday I'm getting ready to do an ultra relay with some friends. We're out here in Los Angeles. It's for Altadena to Palisades. We had the fires exactly about a year ago to this date.
Yeah.
that really devastated a lot of us in LA. So we're
Yeah.
trying to raise money. 6 of us or 5 of us are doing 6 miles each. Doing from this neighborhood to this neighborhood. It basically connects the two. So
Yeah.
it's about like an hour of running each per person. And yesterday we did a track day. And leading up to my hyrox in Anaheim, I was doing a lot of intervals, 800s, 1200s. And I mean, I'm repeating these for like 90 minutes. So it's very like hard intervals. Well, this training load has switched. I'm running more often in the week now. I did a trail the day before. So our workout that day was literally 30 minutes of like turf work where we were just doing like backwards walking, side walking, like the aerobic plyos, some skipping. It took 30 to 40 minutes. And then we only did a few sprint ups and then a few 400s. And most people would look at that workout and go like, what's going on there? But I'm like, I told the team and I was with them, the guys I was training with, I'm like, look at the 30 minutes we're doing here. Look at this side walking. Look at this hip flexor dynamic. Look at like all this stuff is the workout. You have
Yeah.
to treat it like that because you got to get that scaffolding of the muscle, the
Yep.
side lateral movements. Like all my knees and my ankles are feeling good. And then yeah, we did some hard work at the end, but it was only maybe 10 minutes at most or something like that,
Yeah.
30, so I just tell people like that kind of training, you have to look at the week, and then you also have to look at like, hey, even though the training was like all these little movements, those movements are actually very
They're
important.
important. They matter. Yeah, and it's funny. It's great you mentioned that too, because one of the other big things with hybrid training is saying like, yeah, everything you do matters, and a lot of this little stuff matters. And even if you feel like you suddenly don't have the capacity, recovery capacity, or anything else to put in the same number of big workouts that you did, there's always something you can do that's constructive.
Yeah.
There's something you can do. There's, again, there's taking care of your hips, looking out for, balance, improving things like coordination and stability and whatever else. There's always something you can do. And if you're finding you don't have the recovery to do all the things you think you need to do,
Yeah.
then break it down, make those a little bit more efficient, and think about the things that you can do. So much of like this whole hybrid concept too is focusing on what you have the capacity to do. It doesn't have to be the optimal thing for a specialized athlete. It can just be the best option you have available to you. And there's a lot to that.
Yeah. I think it comes to say, I think you talked about this, especially on one of these podcasts I was listening to, is the persona. And it goes back to that mindset. A lot of the folks that you're probably coaching, and you tell me if I'm wrong here, but they're probably like high level folks. They've probably been successful in a lot of different things. So when they come to you for coaching, they're like, hey, Alex, I have this goal. This is the time frame I want to do it in, and this is how I want to do it. They're probably steering that ship. And then you're probably the person that's like, whoa, hey, let's be realistic here. I know you've found success in different ways. To find success in this domain, we might have to just be a little bit more patient.
Yeah. And for a lot of people, it takes a lot longer than they expect. And, it's very much that thing. And I think we all, it's that whole sort of ultra crepidarian belief that because we're good at one thing, really good at one thing, we're probably pretty good at a lot of other things too. And there's a little bit of that bleed over effect where people are like, hey, you know what? I've been training a long time. I know I can suffer. I know I've got good capacity. I'm fit. I'm all these things. I'm going to be able to do this ultra marathon in 6 months. And I know everyone else says they trained for 2 years for this thing. I'm going, okay, like I appreciate the passion, but you're special, but you're also not. Like there's some fundamentals. Like let's not train you to do this ultra marathon. Let's train you in the best way. Like train you to your own limits of what you're actually capable of doing, and see 6 months from now if you're in a position to do this ultra marathon.
Yeah.
That's the mindset shift.
It's a great point. It's actually seeing like what attributes you have as opposed to let's just get to the goal. Because like you probably could get them to the goal, but they're probably gonna be dying at the end there. Can I ask you this? I'll shift it a little bit. I know we've been talking a lot about like the mindset, the personas, but like what surprised you over the last like 10 years, ever since like you dropped your book and you've had courses? And I mean, I've been a follower of your work. I was kind of introduced to your work by my buddy. We did some strength and conditioning together. He's military, but he's like, you got to check out this guy. He's got the CHP or this course, and then all this stuff, which I love your stuff. But what has surprised you over the last 10 years in this space? Who surprised you? Like, who are some athletes that have surprised you? That like, whoa, that's crazy. What athletic things have like been some crazy things for you that you're like, that's awesome? Or, what are you just proud of over the last 10 years that you found to be just amazing?
It's funny you mention that, because I think a lot of the things that have really changed, there's a lot wider acceptance of things that used to be pretty fringe even when I started. Things like ultra marathons, even 10 years ago, were nothing like they are now. Nobody. Like powerlifting, the whole idea of powerlifting influencers was hilarious because the powerlifters I grew up with were, again, the big geared lifters who had like flame beanies on and, blood pressures that
West
were
Side
probably
style.
100% West Side style. These guys would talk about like doses and how high their blood pressure was. Like,
I
and that
was
was it.
watching some of those like YouTubes and they're like, yeah, I'm on this, I'm on this, I'm on this. And then that wall, like I broke in my elbow and I was like, gosh, dang, bro. Like it just sounds so intense what they were doing to
Oh
themselves.
man, it was crazy. It was such a different world. So I think what I really love though is how so many talented athletes have come out to make a lot of this stuff interesting to the average person. I think they've really broken down a lot of these barriers. There are so many more like young powerlifters now who are talented. There's so many people of all different lifestyles trying powerlifting. Trail running has gotten much bigger. While I don't necessarily think everybody should do an ultra because, I think ultras can beat you up pretty badly if you're not ready for them. I love the fact that people are like finding out more about adventure races and they're getting outside to do these kind of things. So I really, really love that. In terms of like athletes who've done exceptional things, I think a lot of people in the hybrid space are defying expectations. Like, my friend Hunter, who's hyrox obviously is a big one. It's just always cool.
Dude.
It's always cool seeing a guy with that size being able to move that speed and be so consistent. And I think, and one of my favorite things too is if you have a conversation with him, he's such a student of strength training and endurance training. He's like encyclopedic knowledge, which is great.
It's crazy because I've listened to him. I've been watching some of his content and I got to meet him once. He won't remember me. He was probably in the zone. I was like, hey, good luck, at like Vegas or something like that. I think he was watching Lauren Weeks, who just absolutely outclassed the freaking field, like running laps around people at Vegas. And I was like, amazing. He is big and like in a good way. And then you just see him move and I see some of the training and I'm like, it just makes so much sense. He talks about training efficiency, economy of movement, and he doesn't waste his time on trying to necessarily get better at hyrox per se. He's really creating like a bigger engine, whether it be aerobics or strength. He's like, I'm not necessarily going to be getting better at the sled push, for example, but I'm going to be doing a lot of movements that translate to it. And I feel like he's really broken down, like, I would say, I don't know how to explain this, but like the actual principles that is needed to succeed at whatever he's doing. So it doesn't have to be the hyrox. If you told him to do an ultra, I bet you he could find what the absolute principles are needed and then just attack those. He has a very intricate mind.
Yeah. And so I think honestly, a lot of names in hyrox too, like him, like Chris Ruglowski on the women's side, a lot of these athletes, what I always love is how much they play as well. Like, Hunter's always like taking on some random new challenge and things like that. And so I think that's actually what's impressed me the most about a lot of these hybrid athletes are the ones who do a lot of things, who throw themselves headfirst into different challenges and who say like, hey, this may not be the optimal thing for my event, but I don't care because I just want to challenge myself. I want to have fun. I want to do lots of random things that I may not necessarily be the best at, but I'm going to try to be the best at it anyway. To me, that's kind of the essence of what this is all about, because honestly, I got started in the hybrid space hybrid space, it didn't exist. But so I got started in this whole idea because I was a power lifter. I had just, sports all my life, college, lost everything, graduated, just got into powerlifting, realized I'd lost all this fitness. I didn't want to just start running endlessly. I wanted to try different things. And I remember showing up to a cycling race, first cycling event I ever did. I was like, this is awesome. And I want to be able to do this. And I want to be able to do this. And I want to do triathlons. I want to try all these things. The whole idea is like, have fun, throw yourself headfirst into new things. And I think a lot of these athletes here are really carrying that idea to like the nth degree, like, set new challenges, do things that scare you a little bit, take them seriously, but throw yourself into them. And I love that. That's the core of what this is about.
No, I love that too. I think it's having fun. I think when you have athleticism, you get some freedom to try new things, right? You're not afraid to give it a shot, and you don't have to be the best in it. Like you can give yourself grace and be like, hey, I'm just giving this a shot. Okay, cool. Surprise yourself. You don't know. You could be the top, you could be in the middle, you could be the end to end. You'll get the data later. I know we're talking about I know we mentioned hyrox a little bit and things like this, but I would say you probably been in this field and you have an interesting health history too, like your professional career around like labs and
Yeah.
pharmacy and all that. That's a whole nother world we can get into. But would you say hyrox is probably, it's kind of like CrossFit. If you look back, there was CrossFit, and then there was, I would say probably the next thing is like there was also Spartan throughout the whole thing, and then
Mhm.
now it's hyrox. Do you think there's going to be other iterations of these like hybrid sports, these like functional fitness sports?
Oh
You see
yeah.
some things coming up?
Oh yeah. Like there have been a lot of other events. First of all, there are like the multi-day events and multi-event, like, Rally in the Valley. Spartan Games had them. There are a lot of these others, and then there are also things like, if Tim Riley doing Apex, which
Mm.
is like one of these more focused multi-event sort of things and really testing multiple parameters. I think people are really liking this idea because I think one of the cool things is realizing that CrossFit existed for so long, and there's almost, I wouldn't say unideal CrossFit body type, but there are definitely like certain trends that emerged over the years where a certain, if you're going to be successful, you had to be good at these things here. And if you were a games athlete, this is what you had to be good at, and blah 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 blah. And I think we're seeing that a little bit with hyrox too. Like people know what you got to be good at. I think a lot of these events are opening the doors for people with different physical shapes, performance profiles. Like they're saying, hey, I'm better at this, I'm worse at that. Oh, this one looks fun. This looks like it's something I can excel at. So I think there are going to be more and more because we're going to have things where more people, as people continue to get excited about like multifaceted athleticism, we're going to find more things that cater to each kind of individual profile.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think, there's some games that are coming out. There's like this world fitness thing, or like this, I don't know, there's like different things, and it feels interesting because a lot of the CrossFit athletes are going into this domain, and
Yeah.
some new ventures are coming in. What's crazy too is how some of these ventures already have like big brands behind them,
Right.
where it took forever for CrossFit to get like Reebok, for example. Some of these guys already on their inaugural thing, they're like, oh yeah, we already got Rogue, or we already got
Yeah.
Puma, or we already got. So it's there's going to be some backing because I think CrossFit, hyrox, any of these events have already shown, hey, there is a persona here, there is money here, there
Yeah.
is, there's something here, and that let's just throw money at it. We could already create the professional logistics. We could do the shock and awe. We could do the entertainment value. We could have a YouTube. We could have a TV channel, whatever. I did want to ask you. I'm going to switch gears here a little bit because you do have a history with this, and we'll
Yeah.
we'll kind of go into. So Marcos and I do work in the longevity space, pharmaceuticals,
Mhm.
nutraceuticals, and things like that. If I were trying to hyper optimize my athletics, whatever hybrid athletic I'm trying to be, my persona right now is like I'm doing some endurance stuff. I'm doing some hyrox, whatever. But I know you have had a background in like peptides and nutraceuticals and things like that. Like, what is your thought with those things? Because they're getting super popular, like peptides. I mean, they've been around for like 70 years, and I've been
Yeah.
doing that stuff for like since college.
Mhm.
What is your thoughts on kind of like, research on all this stuff and how people are going to be attacking it now with like hybrid athletics and hybrid athletes and all that?
Yeah. So I think one of the difficult things about peptides is, of course, knowing that what a wide variety of compounds that includes. Everything from, naturally derived peptide fragments all the way up to completely synthetically generated, peptides with very specific biochemical targets and the like. And, if you look at some of the ones that are better studied, I always tend to focus more on the ones that I think were more naturally derived, only because I think those ones have a little bit more robust research behind them. Because I just know the process of pharmaceutical development, like we know that, when a compound is first introduced, that seems to attack a certain pathway. We see a compound, we examine a pathway that we think could be related to disease or related to some condition. We look at a compound that targets that particular pathway, and then we look at to see if this is something where intervening in that pathway is going to have a beneficial effect. That is such a long process. And, again, like with drug development failures, the fact that like 1% of drugs that, actually get cleared for, like late preclinical phase 1 testing actually make it to market. Like, okay, there are a lot of failures along the way, but there are a lot of compounds, a lot of peptides that have stuck around. Things like BPC 157 has been around and has just gotten such a good reputation. Well,
Yeah.
it's gotten a good reputation, but I think there's a lot of still debate on how it's used. And, like, for example, I think it's a fascinating peptide when you talk about things like gastrointestinal function and how
Yeah.
that helps people, especially people who are on more disruptive training plans, like high stress, lots of movement and all that, and just focusing on nutrient absorption. I think things like that are fascinating to look at. And, what are the
Yeah.
benefits of something like that for an athlete or somebody high stress who's like on a higher calorie diet? Because they tend to have absorption issues anyway, a lot of oxidative stress in the gastrointestinal tract, so on and so forth. Cool stuff to look at. I think the thing is with a lot of other things, though, my focus for a lot of folks is realizing how many of the fundamentals they are not addressing, how much of that they try to address through peptides and through other issues, and not realizing that a lot of these things are going to be by and large ineffective if you don't focus on the underlying things you can control. Certain, growth hormone fragments and things like that people are taking, but you're like, hey, this is not going to make a difference because overall your body is such a highly oxidative stress state that you're not going to be benefiting from this to begin with. So I do work with a lot of athletes who take peptides. I work with some people on targeted peptide structure and peptide protocols and things like that. But a big part of the question is always, hey, are you going to be able to take advantage of this? Have you sorted all the rest of the issues, all the rest of the larger issues?
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. And I've been playing with these for a long time, and a lot of folks, even with the most popular ones like the GLPs or whatever, you have to understand that you're upregulating a lot of minerals and a lot of different compounds, and and it's sure, you might get some short-term benefit, whether that be some appetite regulation or some growth hormone analogs, but in the long run, remember, you're upregulating minerals, upregulating certain mitochondrial issues, ATP, different things. And it's if you don't have the baseline nutrients or the recovery systems in place, you might actually put yourself in a deficit even worse and feel some type of way. So you have to actually be more master of the basics than you think. I do love what you said about the BPC 157. I think that's been probably one of the best for me personally, but also I've seen that within clients, patients, and things like this, where, for example, one of the diets that comes to mind, especially for when you said higher intake, is the vertical diet, right? You've got big guys eating tons of food, which most of those foods should be pretty good, but it's just that caloric load is just, you're trying to make a big person. You're going to have some gut issues, some gut dissensions. Can we make that better? I think that makes a lot of sense from a recovery standpoint. I think BPC is probably one of those popular ones just because you can definitely get all that you want out of it from a nutrient absorption profile and get some recovery. But you're really it's because you're already doing the right things. You are training hard and you are eating well. Can we just support that a little bit, right?
Exactly. And I think that's where I, sometimes get a lot of times when people look to peptides and look to compound, and this has been an issue, at this point, I've been in this business for so many years. It's always been the thing of, I remember working at a GNC literally 20 plus years ago, and people would walk in and they would want something to help them overcome fatigue, something to help them, and it's the sort of thing where you're going, you're trying to fix a major problem with very, very small, you need to take a sledgehammer to this. And right now you're coming at it with a scalpel. This is the struggle. Yeah. Again, not to kind of write it off and be like, oh yeah, peptides are just supplements, but it's going, again, this peptides are about fine tuning. You don't start on them because you have a problem. You do everything you can to fix the problem, and then you take the peptides to enhance whatever it is you're already doing.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think I love that sledgehammer scalpel. I'm going to have to use that analogy because it's you've got so many things going on. You can't be, you just got to get after it. You can't just be hey, this is the one thing that's going to fix you up. I've always had this before where I had a member, I was young in my personal training career, and the person was hey, should I take BCAAs? Come on, I should be doing that, right? I'm it's going to help me with my muscle growth. I'm first off, are you even eating multiple meals per day? They're no. Oh, are you even doing exercise to stimulate muscle growth? No, but I should be taking that supplement. It's no, look, supplements and peptides almost kind of go in that same category where it's it's part of the protocol, but you have to put the foundations in place to justify which ones you need and which ones you want. Now, there's a lot of research on certain things that's going to be helpful for, but overall, you've got to have the the foundations in place.
Yeah, especially things oh gosh, there are a lot of things that people now take and think about to help with sleep and sleep architecture and things like that, and going, sleep hygiene is still 90% of the picture. And, what are you doing to take care of that? And, you look at your sleep architecture, it's all over the place. You need to fix that before you can actually take something that's going to enhance recovery in some deeper phase of sleep. That's how it works.
Yeah, it's so funny. I was listening to, or not even listening, but like someone posted a thing about like, oh, your struggle with your sleep, your struggle with your weight loss, and you're over here blaming cortisol. And then I made a comment like cortisol over here, just like, what did I do? And I make that joke. I make that joke. I said this to a bunch of like clients I was coaching and people. I'm like, cortisol's up because you're the one that stayed up late, or your cortisol's up because you decided to down 10 energy drinks. Like, you're
Yeah,
blaming this guy cortisol. It's just doing its job, but you're the one that did the thing.
exactly. You're the reason it's there in the first place. You called it over. You're like, hey, we need you. Oh my God, look at all this cortisol. What are you doing here? Yeah, exactly it. Exactly it. People are blaming the scenario they're confronted with, which is 100% a result of actions they've taken. Yeah, yeah.
You fix some of the behaviors, it'll fix that. I mean, to go into another technology, and I know you're kind of into this because you've been part of having your own course and part of a few things, artificial intelligence and hybrid athletics. First off, I know that you're connected with Ben, so shout out to Ben and the hybrid guys. How was that process? How did you guys get connected, and how did that whole thing happen where you're part of this whole hybrid thing, making plans for people on their platform?
Yeah, that was really, really funny. It was actually like a sort of an intern slash colleague of theirs who just blatantly reached out to me and said, hey, do you want to talk to these guys? And shout out to her. She was just like totally fearless. And she's like, hey, I'm working with these guys with this really cool plan. It'd be really cool if they could talk to you. I was like, sure, absolutely. Like, note to everybody out there, just be fearless with this stuff. And worst case, yeah. Anyway, so that's what happened. That's how they got started. And I remember looking at the app and thinking that this is just such a cool method of integration. And one of our challenges always is with how do we reach more people? It's not even just like, how do we sell more? It's like, hey, how do we get, because I'm kind of crotchety in my old age. I look at a lot of programs out there and I'm like, oh, this is doing this wrong. And people go, well, do something better. I'm like, okay, great. We'll make something better. How do we actually get it to people? How do we actually like get effective training out to people? And these guys had such a solid app that I think fixes so many of the problems I've always had with apps. That's it, man. And like, this is something I like from a consumer standpoint. Like, I love the visuals of it and everything else. And I love the fact that it lets us put out programs that focus on the big picture, like the general coordination of, like the flow you do things in, all the important stuff of like overarching programming. And then, it takes care of the nitty gritty, which is my favorite thing. I love being able to look at the big picture and say, hey, here's the overall flow and here's what you want to do and all that. And then that takes care of like the exact percentages.
Yeah, no, I love it because I remember getting connected with Ben and Hybrid. It was so funny. The story of that is quite weird. Like, I was on a plane and I've been consulting with this company, a lot, Longevity AI, for over a year at that point, and really bringing a lot of like health data into the marketplace of certain things. But this lady was sitting next to me and she was reading this book called like, I'm not so sure who it was, but it was like Super Intelligence Now or something like that. It was just like the newest, latest book on AI. I was asking her, I was like, what are you reading? And she's like this, and we had like a conversation, and she's like, oh, I know these guys, like, it sounds like you're into the performance stuff. I know these guys, Hybrid, check them out. And I'm like, what a great name, first off. So I got connected with them, and looking at the app, it was so sick. It was finally some of the most great way to finally look at sports performance in the real way, because it said like, hey, look, we're going to look at the spider chart. We're going to look at your power, strength, endurance. And then it's going to compare it to some of the cardio. And then it kind of shows you like where your strengths are. So it's like, if you were to lay out a program, the program wouldn't be laid out to necessarily have you go to your strengths. It's like, okay, well, those are there, so we'll keep those components. Now let's work on these weaknesses. And I look at it, I put my weights in there, I put all this stuff there, and my spider graph changes, my hybrid score changes here and there, and it's cool, but it's showing a lot of like, yeah, I still need to keep working on my aerobic capacity. My time. I feel like my capacity is good. I just don't think my times are good, especially for like a 5K or a 10K, for example.
Yeah. Yeah. It's merciless. Like, one of those things is it always reminds you too just how good some people are at these things. It's always humbling. So yeah.
It really is. Well, look, I really appreciate, you being here. And I know we're close to an hour. I want to kind of get to a few more things here, but Alex, like, what are you excited about now? Like, what are some things, some areas you're looking at? What are like, I mean, I know you just came out with the whole book and did a plethora of work, so I
Yeah.
don't think you're too excited about anything. But like, what are the things that you're looking at, still nerding out about, and just kind of just being on top of more often?
I'm still absolutely in love with a lot of for example, the neuroscience of human movement, understanding pain, understanding how injury impacts like long-term strength and, a lot of other things that have, kind of been rattling around in my head just with regards to a lot of it came from doing a lot of research on understanding how you improve strength and understanding how you improve nation and doing things like gait analysis and looking at where issues and injury comes from. So a lot of that research there, that speaks a lot about how people learn and how we remember things and what impact the context in which we learn something has on how we present that information or that movement later. Information can be anything from information we regurgitate to how we move. I'm fascinated in that area. I love it. It's something that I just love digging into a lot more. I think that's kind of the biggest thing right now as far as personal. Oh, and I still want to write another book on something that is near and dear to my heart. And we'll see if it actually gets any sort of approval. But one of my favorite things is how you can find science that'll back almost anything you want to say. Any claim you want to make, you can find some study you can twist. So it's going to be basically evidence-based rationalizations for bad behavior. And it's going to be a collection of articles on why you should smoke, why you should drink, and all these things, actually just using blatant, obvious misinterpretation of science to highlight how easily it could be manipulated. I think I'll have a great time with that. So I really want to write that book.
That sounds so great, because that reminds me of this podcast that happened like a year or so ago with this one doc that said, no, smoking is good for you. And it was like the Italian study or whatever in Sardinia. And he's like, oh, yeah, if you smoked, like they were living longer. It's like, great. I think you're just going to help weaponize people that are going to be more biased in these influencer things. Alex, please don't put that book out into the light of the world. You're going to make the evidence-based community get so pissed, but it's actually going to be funny content, though.
Well, hopefully it's going to be so obviously satirical that shows like how epidemiological evidence can be completely manipulated and how correlation and causation can be completely manipulated, and like studying or talking about like one pathway out of context and then applying it to the whole thing can be done. So I think it would just be fun, because I think that's a major, major thing. I mean, we see this all the time in everything from training science, exercise science, to supplement science and all that, is this selective interpretation of data and how you go, well, you can say whatever you want. So
yeah. It's really hard. I'm a big proponent of, I like this guy, Lane Norton. He talks about just trying to have higher evidence, trying to be as unbiased as possible. But even then, it's like you could go through so much work. It takes so much data just to go through all that stuff. The way the study was handled, the population. You're right. Like you could literally pickpocket anything out of there and be like, hey, here's my argument. And you could still probably flip it. You could win it. That is quite hilarious. I would love to read that book when it comes out.
Yeah, we'll see. I'm gonna hopefully, like, after maybe another month or two, let the dust settle on this one and then pitch it. We'll see what happens.
And then what else is there for you though? Are you doing anything specific for your training? Anything you're enjoying? I know you're probably busy with life and everything, but
yeah,
what are you up to?
Probably doing the Baton Memorial Death March, which is Marathon, Nevada, with a ruck. The training for that as kind of a warm-up to this event that I wanted to do this summer, which was just an idea I had ages ago, which was the idea of just a self-supported triathlon, self-supported Ironman, where you carry all your gear with you the whole way. So you during the swim, you have everything on a raft. During the bike, you carry everything on your back. During a run, you carry everything, including the bike, on your back. Just kind of like the idea. It's almost want to do it as kind of a proof of concept, because I think it would be a really fun adventure race to do through national parks, through wooded areas, and just swim, bike, run, carry everything with you, leave no trace. So I'm doing one this summer that I put together. I've got the foldable bike and doing all that, and see if it's doable. And if it is and it's fun, I'm thinking about in the future maybe making some kind of like mini adventure race series based on it. So we'll see.
That is quite exciting. I think after you do that, we need to do a round 2 just to interview you on that, because you're about to break so many minds. You're about to break like the ultra marathon triathlon. Like, everyone likes a clean style of, I mean, I know I do a clean style of training, but the get in, get out, and leave nothing behind is it's an audacious goal.
I think that's what I love the most about it, because even the most eco-friendly events where you have transition zones and everything else, like there's a lot of impact, there's a lot of wear and tear, but I want to be able to like get outside and have fun with some of these things and do it in such a way where the whole thought is, hey, I can have fun in nature and I'm bringing everything with me. I'm not leaving anything behind other than footprints. Like that's about it.
That's amazing, man. Well, I appreciate you. Seriously, thank you so much for being here. I know we're close to an hour and all this. And, honestly, you've given us a lot of time. The book for you guys listening is The Ultimate Hybrid Athlete. And then how can people work with you? I know you still work with people one-on-one or work with
Yeah.
your team. Like, where can they find you? And
Yeah. Instagram at Complete Human Performance or Alex.Viada. And just reach out to either of us. Instagram, you can always DM them. On mine, there's a like contact me, which goes straight to my email. That's always the best way to do it.
Awesome. Well, Alex, I appreciate you. Macro Perspective peeps. If you want to work with Alex, get to know more knowledge, things like that, just check him out. All right. Appreciate y'all.
Thanks very much, man. Great talking to you.